Failure, for better or worse, is one of the very few constants in life. It's something that I've eventually been forced to come around and accept as a simple part of life that we all have to deal with. And at times that's really messed with me. But over the years, especially more recent ones, I've come around to using it as a learning tool, and in some parts of life, even look forward to it as one of the main drivers I have for improving my life. So today, I want to briefly talk about my experience with it as a whole, how I've come to deal with it in different aspects of my life, along with some tips near the end on how to deal with it, along with the anticipation of failure, which is almost always worse for me personally. So, with that out of the way, let's get straight into this one. So, failure itself is a pretty broad topic and can come into form in many different ways. There's academic failure, where you might fail an assignment, a test, or an university more often than I'd like to admit, a course. There's failure in the gym, which I often train to or near, which shows me how strong I am at a given lift. There's failure in relationships that can be romantic or otherwise, where things could fizzle out, they could blow up, or fit somewhere in between. And there's also failure in the workplace, which can cause you to feel embarrassed around others, or in some cases, even risk losing your job. And there's probably a few more that I couldn't think of off the top of my head. Now, whatever the case or severity of these failures are, there's almost always a level of stress that you'll be dealing with during these processes. This can be fairly light, like having to push yourself harder in the gym, reaching close to failure, or pretty severe in cases where you might be studying for an exam and getting a grasp on how much information you need to recall, and you might not have the time necessarily to get all of it understood. But I'd say for all types of failures, the nastiest kind of stress that comes out of them are the ones when you're anticipating failure but aren't confirmed for it yet. I'm talking about when you did a pretty wishy-washy performance on an exam and have to wait for the results to be released to confirm if you actually passed a unit or not. It's the unknown part that can really fuck with you, even if you do end up passing the course, since you were spending a lot of time thinking about it when you could have been just living your life and doing anything else. One really hard pill I've had to swallow as I've been growing up is that this is simply a part of life we all need to get familiar with. You can't get everything right on your first time around, so it's pretty important that you get this understood as early as possible so that you can use failure as a tool for success rather than something that takes away from it. I've found that failure more often than not is a net positive. There are cases where it definitely isn't, don't get me wrong, but I think in most cases it can be analyzed and used as a learning experience on what not to do. There's a saying that goes, you need to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, and that has a few different applications, but I think that applies well here, and it sums up my view on failure pretty well. For example, I had a pretty rough academic year in 2025 and failed quite a few courses, mainly due to some struggles with keeping a consistent routine, but also partially due to some undiagnosed conditions. But this year, I looked at where I went wrong and I made some pretty significant improvements in those aspects of my life and ended up with a couple distinctions and a credit for the courses I did in this semester, which I'm very, very relieved for. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, as I had that same wishy washy feeling leading up to the results, as I wasn't sure if I passed the hurdles for the exams or not, and that uncertainty did get in the way of some relaxation time during my break. But even going forward, I learned from that experience and I'm working on putting more time into studying for exams during that period so that I can effectively eliminate any possibility of uncertainty within my courses and ensure that I pass everything, allowing myself more time to properly unwind and relax from the semester content. So to wrap up this video and keep it fairly concise, I want to talk about some ways I've helped minimize the impact failures have had externally and internally on my life, along with how to deal with the anticipation of failure, which, as stated before, I personally find to be the worst of it. For the latter part, it's pretty bad advice, but a lot of it just boils down to doing your best to live in the present moment and not let it get to you that much. In an ideal world, any uncertainty should be eliminated when necessary, but that's mainly because dwelling on it doesn't really do anybody any favors. So it really is in your best course of action to keep a sense of normalcy while you're stressing out about it, and anticipating whatever your those results might be, and just kind of keeping up with what you would normally be doing, even if it does become a bit harder. And as far as failure goes, you should use it in either one of three ways. One, a benchmark for where you are now. This will probably apply best to gym work the most, as it shows your strength limits and gives you an idea on where to go from. Two, a learning curve, so something you can dissect and understand where something went wrong and how to improve from it. And three, a wake up call, so something that kind of acts as a call to action so that you can start taking the steps necessary to improving from it. And again, This can't really be used in every single case, but for most people and scenarios, I find this to be a pretty standard system to help use failure as a tool for improving yourself. There are some times in your life, especially whilst you're still in high school and are preparing for your final academic years, where failure really should be avoided at all costs, and you just kind of need to grit your teeth and get through something. But I definitely say for the vast case scenarios that I've been outside of high school, the severity of failure isn't really to a point where it's unrecoverable, so it's not necessarily something to beat yourself up over, and more so an inevitability in some way for you to learn and utilize to help improve your life. And on that note, I think that's where I want to end today's video. Thanks for tuning in. If you're still here, I went with a more general topic, and it's a bit shorter as well. I haven't really covered something like this in a while. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and leave a comment as well if you have any other advice you'd like to share on how to improve from failure. This has been Lazy, and as always, take care.